here. All right, so clip footwork and starting to include stepping, lunging, etc. into your Indian club play. So if I start out with the basic heels together, toes out posture, the Nendo is part of the Tama system, and I'm going through just basics. I've got movement number 1, or opening circles, movement number 2, or closing circles, movement number 3, parallels, movement number 4 would be alternates, rising or falling, and then movement number 5 is here. I think the extra that he covers is the weaving or Sinawali pattern. All of those, including any kind of lower, forwards or backwards wrist circles, all of that can be incorporated with some stepping and lunging. And I'm going to show the stepping first. This is the way I learned it, not only from him, but if you go through the old manuals, you'll find this. First thing, step instead of lunge. So a step is as far as I can go with my big toe without transferring weight. So I'm going to step to the point. And if I step to the point of the compass and come back to neutral, and I go through and find that point with my big toe through all of the 8 positions that I can step to. And that's straight ahead, 45 degrees to the front, straight lateral, 45 degrees to the rear, and straight back, or anterior, 45, lateral, posterior, 45, and posterior. However you want to describe it. Where I can touch with my big toe is a step. Once I touch with my toe and transfer my weight, that is a lunge. So the differentiation between stepping and lunging is pretty important. And when I'm teaching the course, what I teach is heels together, toes out 45, and to use one club or one piece of the movement, I prefer to use the bottom of the arc. So right there, when the club passes my leg, that is my cue for movement. So if, in this instance, I was going to practice stepping to the 8 points of the compass, I would step there and then have the foot back by the time I get through the full cycle. And then I would go to the next position and recover. The next position and recover. And try to move and recover on the same cue each time. What I mean by that is, every time my hand passes my leg at the bottom, that is my cue to move. And every time I get to this position, the high Y, that is my cue to recover. I find it's just easier if I pick one piece to tell me what to do, right? And starting with a single club is most easy. Start with a single club, get the cue to move. No matter where you're at in your club play, it's going to take a few times to organize when do I move, which direction do I move, how do I do that with the club. So once you've got a pretty good idea of it with a single club, then start going through with 2 clubs. So however you start, clubs up, and then again, as the clubs pass my legs at the bottom, that is my cue to step. And when they come out and get to the high Y, that is my cue to recover. Step, recover. Step, recover. So this is stepping. And you can get the idea, right? Go as slow as you need to make it easy. Go as fast as you can while still maintaining the integrity of the movement, right? So it may be really slow, it may be really fast, I don't know where you're at in your practice. So that's stepping. Lunging. So now I'm going to turn to the side so you can see a little bit more of this. Again, single club, so I'm going to get my left club out of the way, use my right arm as the cue to movement. When the club passes my legs at the bottom, that is my cue to step and then lunge, transfer weight, and then recover. Part of the reason I think that the older manuals describe the lunge as starting at where you can move your big toe, where you can reach with your big toe, is so that the recovery was easier. If I step out much deeper, the recovery is harder. It's a little more challenging. And in the context of European style fencing, that makes a lot more sense. And if you look at the old manuals, you can kind of see where the martial culture from Southeast Asia and India, East Asia, got brought into Europe and blended with their martial culture. It didn't supplant it. It kind of got melted into the pot, if you think of it that way. So now from the front, again, I don't know how you start, but this is where I like to begin. So clubs go up, and then I'm just going to stick with movement number 1. So now I'm going to step and lunge and recover. Lunge and recover. And I want my movements to be pretty crisp. When I go to the side, lean to that side. Right? When I go to the outside, lean to that side. You can also step and sink to the middle, although I find this to not be as useful. This makes more sense. I'm getting my body offline. When I go to the rear, this is one thing I noticed from many of the manuals, and it makes sense with the clubs. As I'm using clubs, right, so legs move when the club moves on the bottom, I want to step back into a lunge and then recover. Step back into a lunge and recover. Step, heel drops. Reason I'm not stepping back this way is the recovery is a little different. It's an entirely different pattern. I'll just demonstrate so you can get an idea of what I'm talking about. If you're familiar with something called an S-lit, if I step, lunge, and then at the height of my lunge, if my arms are up, in line with my heel on the floor, now I can come back and be in line with the toe on the floor. So it kind of identifies which direction and how far you can move in both of these planes. So when I'm stepping and lunging, if I step and lunge forward, I can lunge forward and let the clubs go at an angle. Instead of being directly over my shoulders, I can lean into it and change the plane quite a bit. So it makes it much more challenging now because I've changed the leverage point where the fulcrum of the lever is. All right, so we covered stepping and lunging, and my encouragement would be to take one of those things, stepping or lunging, and then take one pattern and try to make it so that you're hitting the same cue every time. You're only stepping or lunging as far as you can comfortably go, and then it's really smooth. And when you can do one, do two. And when you can do two in the main simple patterns, start adding things to them like a step or a step, right? Make it something that you can easily recover from. Start challenging your brain to figure out, how do I put these patterns into use more consistently with the movements that I'm already familiar with, or can I take something that I'm very familiar with, like stepping and lunging, and add something more complex like the